Hey everybody, Tom Carnell here, Carnell Knowledge, a show I do here on YouTube every Monday and Friday. And I also do daily shorts wherein I review and recommend movies and books and records and all sorts of other stuff. If you don't know who I am, I was a buyer for Tower Records, Record Factory, and Warehouse for almost 20 years. I published and wrote Carpet Nocta magazine back in the 90s. And then for 15 years, I wrote for Fangoria and Dread Central. Now I'm writing novels and short story collections, and those are all available over at Amazon. And I'm doing this show. And I've got a bunch of stuff for you this week, and some of it's very, very cool. Let's get started with a whole bunch of movies. First movie is from 1960. It's called JIGOKU, aka The Sinners of Hell. It's directed by Nobuo Nakagawa, who did The Snake Woman's Curse, and it stars Shigeru Amachi, who is in The Ghosts of Yotsuya, a great film. Yutaka Mitsuya and Yoichi Numata, who is in Ringyu 1 and 2. Has to do with a group of sinners involved in interconnected tales of murder, revenge, deceit, and adultery who all meet up at the gates of hell. It's a bizarre combination of drama, horror, film noir, and art house. Very surreal, very grand guignol, if you know what that term means. An assault on the senses, surreal and disturbing for its time. It reminded me of all things, of Coffin Joe's film, This Night I'll Possess Your Soul. It reminded me also of Goku Body Snatcher from Hell and the classic Blind Beast. This is the granddaddy of all extreme Japanese horror films that emerged through the 70s and 80s and that kind of thing. Not for all tastes, but viewing it is an essential thing in order to understand the modern Japanese horror film. Bizarrely sinister and psychedelic, the film foreshadows things, again, of all things, it foreshadows the guinea pig films, if you're familiar with those. I'll probably do a whole show on the guinea pig films at some point. If you've seen them, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't seen them, trust me on this one. Presentation is a little stagey, stage-bound, which was popular at the time. And it all goes pretty well, as you might expect, until, well, just about everybody dies. And I mean everybody dies. They all end up in limbo, and that's where the whole second half of the film takes place. At that point, things get really bizarre. Overall, I think the film is competently made, acted and directed, but that last act kind of goes off the rails. It's not in a bad way, it just becomes super surreal and super sort of odd and engaging. Recommended for its place in Japanese cinema history and for the effect it have. But yeah, it's gonna be strange and odd and weird, but in a really cool kind of fun way. I enjoy this film. I went out and searched up other Nakagawa films that I'm sure I'll get to at some point. But yeah, JIGOKU is a classic. It's in the Criterion collection, if that helps. Good stuff. It took me a little while to try to get my mitts on it. It's an elusive beast unless you have the Criterion channel. But yeah, great film. Following that, 1964, Der Hexer, aka The Mysterious Magician, directed by Alfred Vorer, who did the College Girl Murders. Stars Joaquin Fuchsberger, who was in a bunch of these things. These things being Edgar Wallace adaptations. They're commonly called German krimi films. I've talked about German krimi films here before. They have a relationship in an arc from film noir to the German krimi to the Italian and Spanish giallo to the American slasher film. These are kind of police procedurals. But in Der Hexer, the sister of a criminal called the Ringer is murdered, and Scotland Yard fears that is going to bring the Ringer to London in order to find out who killed her and to exact his revenge. Again, it's from an Edgar Wallace story. I'm a big Edgar Wallace fan. I think he's a wonderful writer, and he was heavily adapted in German cinema. They really love their Edgar Wallace stories. Has a William Castle kind of gimmick to it, wherein right before the film ends, everything stops and a card comes up and it's like, who do you think is the ringer? And does it kill the momentum? Absolutely. But kind of a neat thing that they did there. And then they come back and everything gets explained in a rather hurried fashion. Felixberger starred in a number of these films. There were 13 of them in all, basically playing the same character. The version I saw was horribly dubbed and colorized in a way that colors on different things would fade in and out. They would kind of fade into a black and white and come back in a completely different color. The film score is decidedly groovy, very 60s kind of sounding. There's an attempt to co-opt the feeling of a Bond film, trying to make clearly a German film into something British. Again, it all happens in London. The plot is unnecessarily convoluted at times and kind of confusing. It is a wildly sexist and misogynistic film, which for the 60s is about par for the course. Women are basically objects to either be murdered or to be fondled, and the men are all lantern-jawed heroes kind of a thing. One funny thing I noticed is they kept cutting to notes that were written by the ringer, who wrote in German. And they'd hold the note up to the camera and offer no translation. It was German. And they would go, oh yeah, clearly it's crazy. Dead ends and red herrings abound. Most aren't handled particularly well. Things proceed until, again, the William Castle gimmick at the end. Everything gets tied up tight, and even it gets teed up for a sequel in literally the last 5 minutes of the film. Overall, it's an innocuous little time waster, amusing but benign. It's on Tubi for free. I enjoyed it, but recommending it is, there are much better Wallace adaptations out there, but this is on Tubi for free, so if you got some time, absolutely. Our next film is also on Tubi for free, and this one's a real kick in the pants. It's called JIGOKU no CHIMIDORO MASSURA BIRUDA, aka Bloody Muscle Bodybuilder in Hell, from 1995. Directed and stars Shinichi Fukusawa and stars Masaki Kai. It was filmed in 1995, but not released until 2012. And it is billed as the Japanese Evil Dead, and that is right on the head there. This is very, very, very much influenced by the Evil Dead films, down to our hero and his girlfriend go to a house, become locked inside the house, and all sorts of stuff happens inside. Micro-budgeted horror film, clearly inspired by the films of Sam Raimi. It's only about an hour long, so it's not going to take up too much of your time. The plot is super thin, but the film moves forward pretty quick, and it's all carried by a sort of gung-ho attitude. It's got everything from backwinding to stop motion animation to out-and-out gore. It looks like it's shot on somebody's VHS camcorder. The score sounds like an old video game. The bodybuilder of the title isn't much of one. He's a thin dude, but he's not a bodybuilder by any stretch of the imagination. Despite its minuscule budget, the film revels in its influences and wears those on their sleeve like a badge of honor. And once the horror kicks in, it really kicks in. Inventive, knowledgeable regarding the genre is working in. The film is remarkably effective and therefore entertaining in its own way. Sure, it's kind of silly. Okay, it's a lot of silly. But now, once you're strapped in, you're along for the ride, and it's a pretty fun ride. I was really surprised by it. I thought it was an earnest attempt at micro-budgeted horror that, for the most part, succeeds. No, it's not good. This is not Gone with the Wind, and it never set out to be. But it's entertaining. I recommend it to Japanese horror film fans, to Evil Dead fans, and for those with an appreciation for low-budget gore flicks. Even has its own tagline, sayonara, baby. All right, moving on to something a little more well-known. the films of Lucio Fulci are renowned, and for the most part, I've seen them all. I have my favorites. I've talked about The Psychic before. But in 1980, he did a film called PAURA, NELLA, CITTA del Morte Viventi, aka City of the Living Dead, aka Gates of Hell. Again, directed by Lucio Fulci. Stars Christopher George, who was in El Dorado and Graduation Day. Katerina McCall, who was in The Beyond, another great Fulci film. Giovanni Lombardo Radici is in it, who was in The Church and Cannibal Ferox. Has to do with a reporter who meets up with a psychic, and they go to a town wherein a priest has committed suicide and thereby has opened the gates of hell. For a lot of people, this was their first exposure to Fulci films as a result of it being pretty readily available in the early days of the VHS revolution. It is a graphic film. It is a confusing film, but it's got a mood like no other. I love this film. That's not to bury the lead, but yeah, I absolutely love this film. Does it make a lot of sense? Does the ending make any sense? Absolutely not. But the ride is very, very fun. At one point, Della Morte Dell'Amore, director Miguel Suave shows up as Tommy, who's a boy in a truck on a kissing date with his girlfriend, and the priest shows up, and the girl proceeds to vomit up her intestines, and that's kind of wild. That's a very infamous scene. Speaking of that scene, reportedly the actress, in order to achieve the effect, they stuffed her mouth with real animal intestines. So that's fun. Well, welcome to Hollywood. Music is by the great Fabio Frizzi, and it's very, very effective. There's an exhumation scene in which the psychic has reportedly died and been buried, and she comes alive inside the casket, and that is a great scene. Very underrated, very harrowing. There's another scene wherein they had built a very special sort of table lathe, and it's drilled through somebody's head, and it is a profound effect. Again, infamous. Many people believe this and The Beyond are Fulci's best films. In my opinion, they're wrong. I think he has other films like The Psychic that are much, much better, hold together much better as a film. The ending, again, is a real head scratcher. But this film has great atmosphere, and the effects are jaw-dropping. Why I do love the film? I think that, again, it's kind of a mess. Like, structurally, it's a mess. Tonally, it's a mess. Logic barely grazes the script. But do I recommend it to people? Absolutely. It's one of those films that's awfully fun to sit down with your friends and to watch, and or to just sort of chill out, and it's a great entryway into Fulci. But yeah, I recommend it for Fulci fans, for gore enthusiasts, and Italian genre completists. Up next, 1978. This is a movie I saw in a drive-in back when I was just a lad, right when it first came out. It's called The Evil, aka Cry of the Demon, aka House of Evil. It's directed by Chris Triconis, who did the infamous Take This Job and Shove It film back in the day. Stars Richard Crenna, who was in First Blood and Wait Until Dark. Joanna Pettit, who is in a lot of TV, and she was in the Casino Royale from 1967. Andrew Prine is in this, who was in The Town That Dreaded Sundown, Grizzly, and Rooster Cogburn, and the great Victor Buono, who was in Whatever Happened to Baby Jane and Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte. He was also King Tut in the Batman TV series. Has to do with a doctor who buys a Civil War-era dilapidated mansion to run a drug rehab, and hires a few friends to fix it up. But the mansion has a very deadly secret. It's kind of interesting. The director, Gus Triconis, he played Indio in West Side Story, which I thought was interesting. This is a really underrated 70s horror flick, aka like sort of a haunted house flick. You've seen the setup before, where a group of people, be they scientists or fixer-uppers or what have you. They come to a haunted house and they are like, oh, I don't believe in any of that. And then they get locked inside and laughs ensue, as they say. Made during the haunted house supernatural entity fad of the late 70s, typified by films like Amityville Horror, Legend of Hell House, and The Changeling. Again, the setup is fairly rote at this point. I thought it to myself, you know, imagine John Carpenter's Prince of Darkness without the swirling jar of goo. But everything sort of happens by the book as the film unrolls, but it's still spooky and kind of effective. In some countries, they clipped off the ending with Victor Buono, which if you've seen the film, you know what I'm talking about. And it is a head scratcher. It takes a weird left turn towards the end. Yeah, in many ways, this kind of felt, as I rewatched it, it reminded me a lot of an ABC TV movie of the week. That's not necessarily a bad thing, because movies of the week spawned a lot of really cool stuff. But yeah, Krenna and the cast are all great. The location, which was in reality an abandoned health spa and resort, is stellar. The direction does its best with what it's got. The ending becomes cliched and kind of ridiculous. It's fun, but it's flawed. I'm not going to lie. I recommend it for fans of haunted house flicks, supernatural story enthusiasts, and followers of 70s, 80s character actors. I have a soft spot in my heart because it reminds me of just being a kid and getting to go with all my pals to a local drive-in and seeing it and having a great time. Up next, let's see. Moving on to a book. I was in Half Price Books, which is a chain up here in Washington, and picked up a book called Silk Sinew. It's edited by Kristy Kulski. Edited as a collection. They like this word diaspora, so they continually refer to it as a collection of folk horror from the Asian diaspora. It's a lot of horror stories sort of seen through the prism of Asian culture. The book includes content warnings, which I appreciated, although they put them at the very end of the book, which I was like, shouldn't this be in the front of the book so that you kind of know what you're getting into? If you have a problem with something, you can skip that story. But no, they put it right at the end. The presentation on the book is just absolutely beautiful. The stories seem sort of familiar, yet being told through a different cultural prism makes them unique. And they cover a variety of moods, be it poignant or informative or thought-provoking. Some are a little gross, some I really hated. But it did spark an interest in going out and finding other books that have to do with horror stories that are told through a different cultural prism. As with all things, story collection-wise, even my own books, The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, apply. Some things are really great, some things are okay, and some things just don't work. But still, is the book worth picking up? Absolutely. I got it for a song at Half Price Books. I think it was like $7. And thoroughly enjoyed it. Even the stories that I didn't really like, they were all well written. And yeah, it's a beautiful book, and I highly recommend it. Moving on to records, got a grip of here that I think you're really going to like. Let's start with 1975. My love for Frank Zappa is well documented on this show, and my favorite Zappa record of all time is One Size Fits All. It was Frank's 14th album and the final record with the Mothers of Invention, using that moniker. It features the summer-fall 1974 lineup of the band, including George Duke, Chester Thompson, Ruth Underwood, the great Ruth Underwood. Tom Fowler is playing bass, and Napoleon Murphy Brock. It also features a cameo by Johnny Guitar Watson and Captain Beefheart, which, if you know Frank, shouldn't be that much of a surprise. This is far and away my favorite Zappa record of all time. While all the Frank Zappa's records show an exemplary level of musicianship, this is a captured moment where composer and band come together and fire on all cylinders. And again, I can't speak enough about Ruth Underwood and how brilliant I think she is. The performances are all jaw-dropping, and the production is some of the best of the 70s and 80s. And if there's something you don't like, just sit still for a minute and it goes to the next song and it's completely different. And it's equally brilliant, but it's completely different. Let's see. A lot of this album is featured. There's a documentary on YouTube called Cheaper Than Cheap. And it features a lot of this stuff being performed live. If you've never heard Frank Zappa in the band, this is a fine place to start. It's more about Frank coming to into his own as a musician and abandoning a lot of the absurdities of the past. It gets silly at times, but man, musician-wise, it's just really, really, really good. Okay, moving on. This is a record that just came out within the last couple of weeks or so. It's the composer is Yom, Y-O-M, and it's called A Voix Basse, aka In a Whisper, aka The Other Side. It's an original soundtrack from a short film. The film being directed by Leila Bouzid, who's a Tunisian filmmaker. Yom is a French clarinetist whose real name is Guillaume Humeret. The music is lovely and poignant, not like a film score per se, more like an album by an artist that happened to be used in a film. The clarinet in it gives it an exotic flavor. Music is perfectly matched to the tension of the film, mellow and melancholic. It reminded me of things like John Zorn and Masada, Black Oaks Orchestra, Anachronic Electro Orchestra, David Krakauer, Michael Portal, Michael Winograde, and Gasper Klaus. This is a great record. I'm just going to tell you that. It's very pretty, very beautiful, very poignant, but it has an underlying tension to it that makes it very, very interesting. Moving on to the next record, 2006. The great John McLaughlin is the artist. The album is called Industrial Zen. This is very much high-tech fusion, incorporates Indian rhythms and modern jazz harmony. An absolutely exhilarating record. A more aggressive and sonically ambitious album than other McLaughlin releases. Several songs act as tributes to musicians. There's a tribute to Jaco Pastorius that comes to mind. And it's a perfect confluence of McLaughlin's interests. If you know John McLaughlin and his travels over the years, this thing kind of brings it all together. Shows that the artist, even though he's getting up there in age, his eyes and ears are still open. And it's a great record. Don't let the word industrial fool you. It has nothing to do with industrial music. But it reminded me of things like, I think these are going to be gimmies, you know, Al Di Meola, John Scofield, Pat Metheny, Larry Coryell, the great Borelli Lagrien, and of course, the Mahavishnu Orchestra. It's a wonderful record. I think I heard about it on something on Sea of Tranquility. Yeah, fantastic record. As with all these records, you can go into the description of this video and you can find links to full album playlists. So don't just take my word for it. If I've said something that perks your interest, go head over there and you can click on it and hear it all for yourself. Let's see. Up next, 1981. American vibraphonist Jay Hoggard did a record called Rainforest. Hoggard played with the likes of Chico Freeman and Kenny Burrell. As per the name, being Rainforest, it has a kind of tropical feel to it. Hoggard has been long ranked as one of the great jazz vibraphonists. This is very much a fusion record, an early 80s fusion record. It reminded me of things like Dave Grusin, the Brecker Brothers, Weather Report, Steps Ahead, Tom Scott, and Lee Ritenour's band Foreplay. It's a great, wonderful record. I want to say I was scouring through YouTube and finding, you know, vinyl community where people hold up records like they're proof of life, kidnapping photos. But someone had mentioned this record, and I remember seeing it back in the day when I worked in record stores, and I went back and sort of looked it up and found it. Wonderful, 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 wonderful. Then our last record, there are two groups involved, Funkso Uljazz and the Blackbyrds. The album is called After Hours Jam. It's from 2025. This is a refined funk soul fusion record. The Blackbyrds are a legendary R&B jazz funk band. The music on this is very cool and sophisticated, I hate to use the word adult because it always implies like porn, but that's not what I mean. It's very grown up sounding, very slick and stylized, and the musicianship is just off the chain. More interested in establish a vibe than showing off. This isn't a shredder record by any stretch of the imagination. It's more of a like, let's establish this sort of mood for 3 to 5 minutes and revel in it. Very much like a jazz record from the 80s, even though it was made in 2025. Good for active or passive listening. Just a groovy record. I really dug this. It reminded me of music by like the Crusaders, David Sanborn, Tom Scott, the Japanese fusion band Cassiopeia, and the great Grover Washington Jr. And that's going to do it for this episode. I'll be back in a few days with more stuff. I got a whole bunch of stuff cooking over here. Be sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, share it with your friends, and keep checking back, because every day I'm going to be, and I have been, including these shorts where in 3 minutes I try to bring you up to speed on something that is, in my opinion, is either fallen by the wayside or slipped through the cracks. I want to bring it back so that people can at least know of its existence, click on a couple of links, hear it for themselves, and decide whether it's something they want to add to their collection. One last thing, I have a new book coming out on June 15th. It's called Open Late. Please go to Amazon and check it out. Kindle is $4.99. The print book is $12.99. It's a collection of short stories from all over the place. I tried really hard to write things that you don't see elsewhere. And if it is something that's sort of a familiar subgenre, I want to at least put a spin on it that's a little different. So check that out if you will. I appreciate you all for watching, and we'll see you next time.